Hi, my name is David Castell Rufas. I work in Universitat Autònoma de Barcelona, and I will be presenting my work on FPGA accelerators for semi-global Levenshtein distance computation. As you know, many animal cells have a nucleus containing a genome. The genome is a collection of genes encoding very long strands of DNA. Although the genome is unique to individuals, it is highly similar between individuals from the same species. 99.9% for humans. This degree of similarity allows to create reference genomes. The genome is commonly represented as a long sequence of letters from the alphabet A, C, G, T. Genomes can be read by sequencing machines. Sequencers must cut the DNA strand into small pieces to be able to read it. It can be classified as short read and long read depending on the length of the pieces. We will focus on short read sequencing, which typically produce reads shorter than 300 bases at very high throughput. To recover the whole genome from the pieces, an extract step is required to map each read into a location in the reference genome. This process must allow errors, either to support errors introduced by the accuracy of the sequencer or to allow the mutations of the individual with respect to the reference genome. To map the reads, a linear approximate search in the reference genome for each read is privative. A common technique is to extract a seed from the read and use it for exact search with the help of an index. Many matching locations in the reference genome will be obtained. Each candidate location then is compared with the read. The preferred method to evaluate the candidate locations is Smith and Waterman gap-affine local alignment, which gives an alignment score. The higher the score, the better the match. Although less accurate in biological sense, semi-global Levenshtein distance can also be used. In this case, the lower the distance, the better the match. For this example, the second candidate location is the best one as it has a higher score and also a lower distance. Smith and Waterman is a dynamic programming method that requires building a bidimensional table. Thus, it has a quadratic time and space complexity. This step can require thousands of clock cycles, easily becoming a bottleneck in read mappers. Could we find a fast way of discarding candidates with high error? The answer is yes. This technique is known as seed filter and extend and introduces pre-alignment filters before computing Smith and Waterman. Semi-global Levenshtein distance can be used as a very good filter. It is still quadratic but easier to parallelize. Our goal will be to create a fully parallel design in FPGA that can compute the distance in just one cycle. The dynamic programming table to compute Levenshtein distance is built with these simple rules. MPairs found a very efficient way of describing the dynamic programming matrix in terms of increments, either horizontal, vertical, or diagonal, and the increments in terms of Boolean expressions. So the values from the table can be computed by aggregating values from the Boolean bit vectors. For certain lengths, MPairs algorithm can compute the whole column from the table in a single loop iteration using bitwise operations. But now we are not interested in analyzing the execution time but the number of computed cells. Look at this table from the previous example. The bit vectors for the whole table must be computed, but only the values for the last row must be recovered by using a known value and the horizontal increments. Finally, the minimum value from the recovered values from the last row is selected. Hyyrö introduced an optimization to reduce the number of computed cells. If we define an error threshold k above which we will report the distance being k, we can avoid computing many cells from the table. In this banded approach, then, it becomes necessary to work with diagonal and horizontal increments. No FPGA implementation from this work is described in the literature. On our work, we also based on a banded table to reduce the number of computed cells, but we focused on reducing the required resources required by the others needed to aggregate the Boolean bit vectors. We proposed to use satturating others. Instead of selecting the leftmost diagonal increments, we select the k diagonal increments, and use the horizontal increments in both directions, left and right. This aggregation path reduces the saturating point of the others, compared with the aggregation path proposed by Hyyrö. This algorithm can be simply described in OpenCL. For every cell from the table, the C code implements the simple Boolean expressions defined by MPairs and Hyyrö. The satturating adders are introduced in the aggregation steps. The accelerator is used from a host by transferring a batch of large number of read and reference pairs and invoking the distance computation kernel. The results are transferred back to the host when done. The design is highly pipelined so that a new distance computation can be initiated at every clock cycle. We synthesized the designs for several read lengths and error thresholds targeting two Intel FPGA accelerators using Stratix 10 and Arria 10 FPGAs. As our kernels are able to compute the distance in one clock cycle, the achieved performance depends on the effective available bandwidth to access the data. As longer reads require to fetch more data, they achieve a lower number of millions of pairs per second. However, if we consider the number of dynamic table cells computed, the gigacell updates per second increase linearly with the read length. If we compare with the literature, our accelerator provides a higher number of millions of pairs per second than the best previous result from Kai. But note that Kai's work is using a much smaller table size. If we measure the results in GCAPs, we are an order of magnitude faster. Our optimization allows to target much longer strings with best reported performance so far. We also benefit from the architecture of the Hyyrö accelerator that has a direct access to host memory, avoiding to spend time in memory copies. In conclusion, we have shown a new optimization to compute semi-global Levenshtein distance, which is especially useful to reduce resource usage for FPGA accelerators. With a highly pipelining design using OpenCL, we provide the best reported performance for the problem on FPGA so far. Thanks for your attention.